Welcome to the speaker series on a shot glass of recovery. This podcast is a place for real stories, honest conversations, and recovery lived one day at a time. The views and opinions shared here are simply our own personal experiences. We do not speak for or represent Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole.
You get a house, you get a car, then you start thinking that's all you are, but you don't know the truth. So let me spell it out for you. Now I got your attention, now there's a start. Now sit and listen to my favorite part. Life's been giving us some clues. The answer lies inside of your.
Hey family, I'm Zoe and I'm a recovered alcoholic. Thanks Charlene for taking the meeting. Thank you everyone who's doing service in the background. Thanks Carolina for asking me to come at midnight in the UK. I foolishly had a pot of coffee earlier just to keep myself going, and I'm going to be suffering for that when this is over. I wanted to read this little story which I find quite wonderful, and it will just sort of hopefully ground me and just sort of get into the meeting. So I wasn't aware I had to share for so long either. So it talks about the Starfish story. So being recovered and given the power to help others, it's not feasible that we're going to save every suffering alcoholic. Thousands of us are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which is so freely given to us? The Starfish story provides an answer. So a couple of untreated alcoholics are walking along the shoreline at low tide. It's a really hot day, and there are thousands of exposed starfish suffering under the heat of the sun, drying them up and killing them by the thousands. And a recovered alcoholic is constantly bending down over many times, bending down, picking them up, bending down, picking them up. And the untreated alcoholic says, "What are you doing? That's just stupid." And he replies, "Well, I'm saving the starfish." And the untreated alcoholic says, "Saving the starfish? Look around you. There are thousands of dead starfish, and many more are going to die under this incredible hot sun. You're not making any kind of difference whatsoever. Why bother?" To which the recovered alcoholic replied, while picking up another starfish, "I suppose you are correct in your assessment, but I think if it makes a big difference to this starfish I have right here," as he tosses the starfish back into the ocean. "We cannot save all the suffering alcoholics, but we can make a difference by sharing our story of recovery and win the newcomers' confidence so that we can take them through the miracle of the 12-step program, one alcoholic at a time." Now, when I came in here, I thought all this was nonsense. My sobriety date is the 23rd of June, 2015. I hid at the back of the room. I didn't talk. I was shaking with fear, worry, restlessness, and I just didn't think that this thing was going to help me at all. And every time you laughed and seemed a bit merry, I thought you were all laughing at me. It was all about me, and I need to get out of here quick, you know. I came in here broken woman, and the childhood was worthy of blaming for my problems and my resentments. You know, I was born 2 days after Christmas. So as a child, that was a huge resentment, you know, because there was Christmas, drinking, fun. And then I found out I had a half brother when I was 5 years old. His birthday is on Boxing Day. So of course they'd all have a joy, you know, oh, it's David's birthday and then my birthday. It felt like, you know, real or imagined. It was like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. 27th of December, it doesn't matter. You know, so I remember sort of this looming kind of Christmas time, and it was this sort of like ego. What about me?
DJ
You're right there, Charlie. But yeah, it was like, what about me? What about me? What about me? You know, and this meism, it was like doing press ups every night when I went to sleep as a kid, you know, and I'd get up and I'd be like walking to school and I'd think everyone's looking at me or they all think I'm weird and I'm constantly doing other people's thinking and I'm sitting in a classroom. I don't understand what the teacher's on about, but I'm going to sit next to the smart one because she's got nice writing and she's clever and I can just copy her stuff. So as a kid, I got real sneaky of like, well, I could just copy the clever kid, right? So and then I can pass and get away with it. And this is what went on. When I was about 12 or 13, my alcoholic mother bought me this scrappy little pony when she was drunk one day, but she didn't give me, like, the things you need for a pony is a field and feed, and you need their feed done and all this kind of stuff. So that began my robbing career as a child, is I would go out in the night stealing hay from barns and other people's horse feed and their grooming brushes and so already by this age, sort of like 12, 13, I'm smoking, I'm sneaking out at night, and I'm stealing, me on my little bike with my little dog, and I'm sneaking around and I'm smoking in bushes, and I was an alcoholic through and through. I had alcoholism before I picked a drink up, and it was a huge problem, when I look back. And then my first drunk was my second drink. So one night I found some booze and I drank that and I knew I was going to do it again. And the second night, I went back to the cupboard and I got this big bottle of whiskey, and I got halfway down that sucker and I'd arrived. I was like, oh, I felt all right in my skin. I felt like didn't matter if people were looking at me. In fact, I felt a bit better about myself. My boobs got bigger. I got taller. I became, like, oh, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I fall off the horse in front of someone, or, it doesn't matter if I make a fool of myself. I didn't care. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I can't remember the first pickle I ate. I can't remember the first, I don't eat meat anymore, but the first steak I ever made. I can't remember those things, but I remember that like it was yesterday. And and it was a shit show actually that night, excuse my language, because I was very ill and I wet my pants and I swore that I would never do it again, right? And it wasn't long before I was doing it again, and I didn't know, obviously, back then about mental obsessions, physical craving, and all that kind of stuff. But, for me, anytime I was feeling something or a relationship wasn't going quite right, I'd be so judgmental of them because they're not behaving how I need them to behave. So my remedy to that was to hire a van and move. I would just move. And I'm not joking when I say I've probably moved at least 50 plus times in my life. And that was my solution. I'll go somewhere else and I won't drink, and I'll generate on my own power this a new life, right? I mean, it seems totally sensible. My life is falling to pieces. I'm not showing up at work. The relationship's going down the toilet, so I need to leave, right? And start again. But what happened is I would take myself with me and I would find people and pubs that were open at 8 o'clock in the morning, or, round the clock, and they got to know me by my first name. And then I would find service stations, petrol stations that had a 24-hour opening. So by the end of my drinking, because I don't want to go into this big drunkalog, this time of night precisely, like, midnight gone, is when I would come alive because I'd given up being able to be a day walker. Like in the day, I was just paranoid that you were going to smell my breath, find out that I'm a Looney Tune, find out that I'm not worthy of being on this planet. But when it got dark, the early hours is when I come to life. And so I get in my car, because I'm a professional drink driver, and I would go and drive to get my 12 or 24 cans or my 3 bottles or whatever, and I'd usually buy a lettuce or, some random thing, so it didn't look like I'm just buying alcohol, because, I mean, who does that? Alcoholics, right? So I'm buying food as well, whatever. And then I would drive home and I would drink more, and then I would decide that I'm gonna phone him up and go and visit him. And then I would spend probably 2 hours trying to decide what I'm gonna wear to look good enough for him, and I'd turn up there at 3 o'clock in the morning at this poor suffering bloke's house, whoever it was at the time, and spend the night with doing whatever with him. And, and then somehow I managed to still make it back to work. This is functioning alcoholic, we call it, don't we? I still make it back to work for 6:30, 7 the next morning, and I just need a couple more cans just to keep me up, right? Keep me going. And it just went on and on like that. The last 5 years of my drinking, it was 24/7. I remember I was doing this live-in job, and the boiler man was knocking at the door and he wanted to come and service the boiler for the accommodation. It wasn't my accommodation, it was my employer's. And I couldn't let him in because of all the cans and the bottles. Like, I mean, I'd gone past hiding. I mean, I don't know if there's any hiders in the room, right? Gone past hiding it in cupboards, welly boots and car boots and under the bed, and I'd gone past all that. I just chuck it on the floor, or I'd make little pyramids on the ironing board of, cans and bottles. Real pretty. I used to take photos of it. Nuts. Like, I was nuts, right? So these people who I was working for, they called me into their kitchen one day, and they are the angels, which there are many, who walk this earth. And they called me in, and I thought, oh, well, they probably just want to talk about, how wonderful I am. Because by this time I was so drunk and deluded that I thought I was doing a wonderful job and they couldn't live without me. And aren't I fabulous? And they said, Zoe, we want to talk about your drinking. And I was shocked. I mean, how dare they? Because I was hiding it so well, right? And they said, "Oh, my bins are full and, what's going on?" And I said, "I need help." And it was the first time, that kind of, in the book it talks about, I learned I had to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic, and this is the first step. And that happened right there in their kitchen, through the embarrassment, guilt, shame, and remorse. But that's when that happened for me, or to me. And so I ended up in this rehab, and they took me on a wacky bus to meetings. And I went to another fellowship meeting because that meeting was shorter, because I didn't want to go to AA because the meeting was an hour and a half, whereas the other one was just an hour. You know, so I wanted the easier, softer way, right? Because that's what I've learned to do. Like I can do. I just want the easy, softer way. And I went to this other meeting for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then someone says you should come to the AA meeting. It's actually really good. And I says, well, how many people go? Like sort of. I had no idea, but I was sort of like, well, it has to be a meeting that suits me, sort of thing. Anyway, I turn up at this meeting and there's a lady there who's probably like 100 years old, and she's holding this little teddy bear under her arm. And I thought, well, that's a bit weird. And she was sharing about like how she felt as a child and how she hid bottles and how she ran away, from relationships. And anytime she had a feeling, a thought or emotion, she just couldn't stand it and she was drinking. And in the end, she was drinking herself to death and she couldn't stop. And it hit me, it hit me in that room. There was about 30 or 40 people in the room. And I just broke down because it was like that was what was happening to me, and I was so deluded I couldn't even see it. You know, do we call it denial, don't we in here? Or lying by omission, so dishonest. And I couldn't see the truth. I couldn't see it. Anyway, I end up going to this sort of other rehabby type place, and I started going to meetings regularly. And I'd sit at the back of the room trying to hold hands with whoever would hold my hand, you know what I mean? I and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," if I walked into a room, I'd be, "I'm so sorry," and it just, oh, it was like such a mess, and I was showing up at meetings that weren't on because it was the wrong day, and But anyway, I sat at the back of the room and there was this old timer there, and he was talking about how important it is to share. And he was looking at all us newcomers, like beady eyed. It's so important for your recovery, newcomers, or you say you lot from the treatment centre, to share. And I would think, what a load of twaddle. Like, how's that going to help me? You know, but I tell you what, when I first open my mouth in a meeting, like in the physical meetings, like people start clapping and all that, and you know what I mean? Anyway, after about going there for months, I shared, I never remember what I said, but I said that I'm an alcoholic and I need a sponsor and all that stuff. And this woman came up to me, she went, "I'll sponsor you." Like sort of like that, "I'll sponsor you." And I thought, "Oh my God," I was terrified, like. So anyway, she took me through some of the work, the 1, 2, 3. I did that in the beginning. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Well, not doing 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then I need a new sponsor because, this one's not working. So this went on for, I don't recommend this to any newcomers. Get on with it. The 4th step isn't that scary. But yeah, I've basically put my recovery in a bit of a whirlwind for about 18 months, changing sponsors after doing the 1, 2, 3 dance. And then I got this other sponsor, and she was quite regimented, and she took me through all the work. And it was the first time that I could see my fear, that my whole life has been driven by fear. And that would cause me to be irresponsible. It would cause me to be inconsiderate. If I'm drunk out of my mind, I am not considering anybody in my life, my family, my friends, my job. I'm dishonest. I'm not telling you the truth. I'm outright lying to you. You know, I'm selfish, although I don't want to admit it. I'm self-seeking. I'm, I'm the best employee you could ever have, and I'm drinking in the bar, and I'm judgmental. I can do the best. You're not good enough, and all this kind of stuff. That was quite painful. But one thing that I've learned, and it wasn't from that sponsor, but more sort of in recent years, is that if I have all these defects of character that I learn about in my 4th step, 5th step, that I also have these assets. One sponsor sent me away and says, "Right, go and write your assets." And I went, well, I like dogs and horses. That's like all I could come up with, you know. But this sponsor that I have now, well, has pointed out, if you have fear, there is courage in there. If I'm living in a God's will life, you know, there is courage. I get granted the courage to make a decision in step 3 to go through this work. And looking back in hindsight, the courage it takes to make that decision to work a 4th step. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. And if it's done perfect, it's probably wrong. I think it says that in the book somewhere. But we just do it. Do it to the best of your ability. Don't consciously leave anything out. And you will have an experience. And that was my experience. Sitting down with a sponsor, going through all of my, all of this stuff that I've done, and the blame game, and the this and the that. And not immediately, but what happened as I went through the work, as I got to step 12, and I was like, "What do you mean I've got to sponsor people?" Like, part of my ego was so excited about having sponsees that I thought, "Oh, they're gonna come and clean my car. They're gonna come and clean my house, and they're gonna be like, 'Zoe, you're just so wonderful,' and all this." I can't get them to answer the phone sometimes, right? 'Cause, I mean, I'm an alcoholic of the real variety, sort of still deluded. And, but working through with other people is when recovery really took off for me. Because when I'm sat down with another drunk who's just like me, and I'm on this shoreline throwing in the starfish, one at a time, I get to be out of my self-centered life. Like page 52, my self-centered life. I'm driven by all this stuff. It says, we're having trouble in personal relationships. Is that me? Is that you, sponsee? Are you having trouble in personal relationships? Can you control your emotional nature? It's a really good question because I don't want to say no, but the truth is no, I can. you know, that's why I drink. Well, so I think. I'm prey to misery and depression, drunk or sober. And I look back pre-drinking as a child and this is where this connects with me. I was prey to misery and depression as a kid. I couldn't make a living, and what that means for this alcoholic is a daily life that I want to live in. You know what I mean? I always wanted to be somewhere else, someone else, more money, bigger house, somewhere else. I have a feeling of uselessness. Yep. And I'm realizing, and then I'm full of fear. Page 52, I'm unhappy. Page 52, I can't seem to be of real help to other people. Now, this is what I was living with before drinking. And for a while, probably 2 decades, drinking kind of took all that away and sort of allowed me to have this false sense of reality. It's a self-centered life I've learnt in these rooms. When I'm trying to control life to suit me, when I'm trying to control other people, situations, circumstance, I'm living within this a self-centered life, and it's uncomfortable to say the least, you know. And there's a period of sort of, oh, if I move, that'll fix it. But I've learned by going through this program, I'm a runner. Has that worked before, Zoe? 50 plus times moving? Never. It's never worked. I have to try, I have to be willing to try another way. I open my big book to the first page, the cover, and it's blank because I know nothing. Like even when I got here, and even now, I have no knowledge of how big and beautiful this God-centered life is. But there's a roadmap in this book that teaches me, which is all I ever wanted at school, by the way, teaches me how to live by the principles of love and compassion and understanding and forgiveness and goodwill and love. Now, those are things that I never had, never even knew about. I never understood it. I never felt it until I went through this program and continue to do so. I have my big book, it's all multicolored and it's all got, all the musts. When they say there's no musts in the big book, well, actually, there's quite a lot. And, I've become a bit of a nerd about it. And over the last decade, I open a page in this book and I'm like, oh, I've never read that bit before, because it changes and it means different things, doesn't it? It's no longer Bill's story, it's Zoe's story. Where's your experience in this? You know what I mean? And the family afterwards, or to the wives, it's like, well, to the sponsor, to the sponsee, to the friend. This is like the directions of how Zoe can live in the promises. Am I living in this self-centered life? Who wants to live there in these bedevilments? We can be free of it. The book it talks about, I had to ask myself why I shouldn't apply to my human problems the same readiness to change my point of view. So it means my point of view needs changing, you know. And I was like, Now saying what I've already said, how deluded and how crazy I was, it's like, yeah, I probably do. I probably do. I probably do. And it surprises me. It surprises me, like, all the time, every time I take someone through this work, how I don't even know how to put it into words. Like, how godly it is. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. I came in here selfish, self-centered, and just thinking about me. My life isn't working. I thought I came from my drinking, and I end up staying from my thinking, and I'm thinking and I'm thinking, and then when I'm sat down working with someone else, I'm not thinking, and it's the most free I ever feel. You know what I mean? Like a new freedom and a new happiness. It's like that's what's on offer here. I have to continue this stuff. And I remember I got physically ill, which means I struggle to stand and to walk and things like that. And there was a while there where I blame God. You know, I've come in and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm doing, and then I realized that I was still expecting something out of it. I'm doing all this stuff and I'm helping all these people and I'm doing my temp step and I've made my amends, you know what I mean? And it's like I still have two amends to make. Newcomers, don't do that. Financials. Oh, I thought, oh, it's God's fault. But do you know what? After moving house so many times and being a runner, I actually thank my higher power now for putting me in a position where I can no longer run. You know what I mean? I can no longer, in a weekend, load a van up and move. I can no longer run away from myself. And I quite often have to sit, be present, and I do a lot of breath work in recovery, not instead of, but as well as. And that helps a great deal with just being centered, being right here, right now, because that for me is where God is. I've got into feeding the birds out in the garden, and there's all these different types of birds, and there's one right. I've got a little mirror out there. Weird, maybe, I don't know. I like it. The plants growing around it, and there's this one bird that runs up and down in front of the mirror, tweet, 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 tweeting, like, and it's going berserk, looking at itself in the mirror. And I'm thinking that one's definitely alcoholic, isn't it? It's definitely the alcoholic one. It's trying to have a fight with itself in the mirror. It's like, yeah, that's definitely in the bedevilment. But when I got sick, I ended up on like a, what do you call it? Like a council house. And I remember, like, being so judgmental about being in a council house and being on some sort of benefit or something, because that wasn't me. I was always a workaholic, and I end up in this situation with the body the way it is. And God, I'd like God to show up in ways I want him to show up, but he never does. But in this situation, I got put in this little house, and I was there about 6 months. And then in the middle of the night, there was like this banging and screaming coming from next door. And this went on for like another 2 or 3 months. And I was secretary of the local meeting there. And I chatted to a few fellows, and I said, I don't know what to do about this neighbour of mine. And they said, well, just go round there, you know, with love, compassion, tolerance, and goodwill. Because I wanted to go round there and put my hands round his throat for waking me up all the time. Some of the time, let's be honest, not all the time. And I went round there, and he had blood all over his knuckles where some alcoholics do that. That wasn't my thing. I'd end up in bed with people or driving, but his thing was beat the house up. That we show up different, don't we? And so anyway, he's got blood all over his knuckles, and this God moment channeled through me, and I just put one hand under his hand and my other hand on top of his hand, and I said, "You're going to be all right. Do you wanna talk? I've been where you are." Like the Starfish story, that we get to be helpful. And that lad, he was only in his 20s. I took him to his first ever meeting, and he got sober in that meeting. I don't know if he still is, but it was mad. Like that time when I thought my whole world was falling apart, I couldn't physically work. I was desperate. I got moved into this place where I didn't want to be. It was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know anyone. And the house number was number 12. And God moved me in next door to an alcoholic who needed help. Like, it just blows my mind. And then, believe it or not, it happened again, because I ended up needing to be in a bungalow, and I've got all these supports around me. I'm like a little old lady, right? And and I move in here, and I get friendly with the neighbour. He seems quite nice or whatever, helpful, friendly and helpful. But I could tell straight away he's suffering with the disease of alcoholism, you know. And Christmas before last, I couldn't get hold of him, and we found him on his sofa, and he died from this disease. And I got to be there with his family, who lived just up the street. Now, this isn't what I had planned. I thought I'd have 20 sponsees cleaning my car. I didn't think that I was going to be, you know, uh, consoling neighbours and helping families with the death of their brother. And, like how God shows up. This is your assignment, Zoe. And every morning I'm like, what's the assignment today then? Oh, I got nothing to say then, have you? Like, because I'm still wanting this universal energy to go, hello, Zoe, today we are going to do this. Oh, okay, brilliant. Never happens. Never happens. But when I get out of my own way, I end up in these situations being mesmerized by the birds outside and laughing at the little one that's running around by the mirror. Or I'm mesmerized when I'm talking to, you know, the, the neighbor that passed, their family members, and we're sharing stories, and how that they haven't spoken for 2 years, and how the relationship kind of parted, and get to hear how it's brought their family closer together, and I can be part of that, and I go up there for cups of tea and coffee and wait, morning, like it's like just a smile and a wave. It's like, and I'm doing it. It's not like it used to be kind of like, oh, I have to better say hello, But now it's sort of like I'm a day walker. You know what I mean? Like I've gone from waiting for it to get dark before I can feel like a real person in my insanity to being a day walker. And I talked to little old Bonnie on her walker. Bless her, she's 100 years old. And she goes, "Hello, Zoe, how you doing?" And old Zoe would be like, "Get her away from me now." But I stop with me dogs. "All right, Bon, how you doing, love? Do you need anything?" A couple of weeks ago, she fell over in her garden, couldn't get up. She rang me up. "Zoe, I need some help. I've fallen in the garden and my son's gonna go mad." And I went over there with the help of the pole of the washing line to winch her up off her ass from the floor and give her a big hug. And the carer turned up, and then the son turned up. And it blows my mind. Thank you for my assignment, right? That's what it is. That's my assignment. I just pick the fish up and I throw it back in the ocean. Get out your own way, Zoe. That's it. Stop trying to control, plan, because when you do that, it just doesn't end well. That's your assignment. It's placed in front of you. But at the moment, I'm working with a sponsee. It was so mad. I've been in such amount of self pity with pain in my body and physical stuff, right? And I'm on a meeting, like you do, you know, and there's this lady on there, I won't mention her name, and she's like, I feel like I'm gonna go drinking. I've had enough, I'm 9 months sober, and like we get, like the bedevilments. I'm having trouble in personal relationships. My life's falling apart. I'm gonna go and drink. And I said to her, I'll take you through the steps. because I mean, I'm quite addicted to it, I suppose, in a way. And she went, "Oh, would you? Yeah, all right." So anyway, I've learned to make the approach rather because, it's easy to put numbers in chats and stuff and expect these suffering people to ring me. I'll talk about me. Y and that's what I was doing, and I feel bad about that because I had an expectation that someone who was as crazy as I was when I got here to call me up, you know, I make the approach. And that lady suffers from a horrendous illness. She's in a wheelchair, right? She can barely talk because she's got neurological issues going on. And it's like, it's happening. This is your assignment, Zoe. You know, this lady who's in a wheelchair, desperately disabled, can hardly talk, and you think you've got problems. Struggle to stand. At least you can stand, right? You know, and I've got to take her through the work, and she's such a bonny lass, and what she's been through, it's just a beautiful experience. But I can't see the timer, so I'm just going to end on this. So we're talking about the bedevilments. So number one, we're having trouble in personal relationships, and the promises, page 83. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Number two in the bedevilments, we can't control our emotional nature. Page 83, promises. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. Number three, page 52, we're prey to misery and depression. Page 83, the promises. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. 4, we couldn't make a living. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. Number 5, we had a feeling of uselessness. The promises, page 83. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. 6, we were full of fear. The promises. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. 7, we were unhappy. Promises, page 83. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. Number 8, we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. And then the promises, page 83. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. And most of all, we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could never do for ourselves. I mean, it's the greatest show on earth, isn't it? Anyway, I'm Zoe. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to enjoy a shot glass of recovery. If you'd like to help support the show, you can make a voluntary contribution through PayPal at A Shot Glass of Recovery. Every donation, no matter the amount, helps cover the costs of producing the podcast and allows us to keep sharing stories of hope and recovery. Thanks again for your support. It truly means a lot.
Everything you do, the answer lies inside you.